Hey team, I wanted to share some tips and strategies that I have learned over the past year and many of these over the past 13 years of my teaching career. This is not an exhaustive list, but it is a list of 10 different tips that came to mind as I thought through what had really worked over the past nearly year while I've been teaching in a virtual and hybrid setting. A lot of these I'll continue to use once I go into in-person teaching as well next year. So on the right here, you'll see these are the tips, and then I also have another document that I will share and put a link in the video. This is a longer version, probably won't be quite as exhaustive as what I say right now, but it's also got a bunch of links to different resources. So, number one, say their names, okay, that's bad. Say their names. That was supposed to be from Destiny's Child. So I think it's really important that we say our students' names and try to say them, if possible, a couple of times a class, if not more. There's a lot of power in hearing one's name, and saying it can empower the students, make them feel included from the get-go. Number two is actually check in with students at the beginning of class. And there are a bunch of different ways to do that. I oftentimes just say in Spanish, but you could do it in any language, how are you feeling? 1 through 10. 10 is excellent, 1 is horrible. And then the students will type their answers. We use Google Meet, so they type their answers into the chat, and I read their names and what the number was. I'll show you an example of how I did this in a PD that I did with teachers. Just an example.
Horrible. 7 to 8. 9.2. I like it, Mary. All right, Mary Page is 9.2. Taylor 7. Laura 8. Elizabeth 8. Anne Marie 8. Lindsay 7. I have to go Spanish. Catherine 7.5. Anna, Annie 8. Amy, I missed. Oh, AJ. I'm so sorry to hear that, sir.
So that's the idea. It takes probably a minute or less to read off every student's answer, and it gives you an opportunity to check in with the students after class or throughout the course of the class, or just to know, have a quick barometer of how they're doing. I have some other ideas of questions that you can ask at the beginning of class on the longer Google Doc. Ask for student feedback and reflections at the end of class. This is something that I started doing at the beginning of the year using a Google form. Again, this Google form is linked in the longer version. I continue to do it now that I'm using Desmos, and I'll talk more about Desmos later. So I always ask students, rate this class on a scale of 1 to 10. And then I always ask a follow-up question, why did you feel this way? Sometimes I'll say, what could I do to make the class better next time? What could you do to make the class better? You could add any questions here. It takes 30 seconds to a minute and provides me with invaluable feedback as to how students are feeling about class. And oftentimes students give me tips and suggestions that allow me to improve my class over the course of, sometimes they'll give a suggestion and I realize, oh, I can just adjust that for the very next time that I teach that same lesson, the next block. So that's been really helpful and gives me actionable information, and it allows students to feel and be heard, which in this virtual setting is challenging, and you'll see lots of these tips are related to that. Okay, so next one, dedicate time every once in a while to asking community building questions. Now, this could be within the context of your lesson, ideally, but also you could just do a standalone class. If you are given the flexibility to do so, cut yourself a break. Give yourself a class once a month in which really you just get down and ask students questions about their lives, let them discuss these questions, engage them on a different level. And so these questions, you can start very low stakes questions, such as, if you were a superhero, what superhero would you be? Or if you could have a superpower, what would it be? Or what's your dream vacation? And then you can get deeper. What's a time that you had to step outside of your comfort zone? Lots of, again, I've linked to a bunch of different resources in this longer Google Doc, which will be on this link to this video. Positive narration. This is something that I learned from John Cowart, and he suggested that it is incredibly important that you consistently point out when students are doing the right thing. This is super powerful in the virtual setting as well as in the in-person. And what it looks like is I'm looking at on Desmos, I can see what percentage of students are responding to questions, or I'm looking at the chat, or I'm looking at my Jamboard, and I can see that, I don't know, it looks like about 10 students in class of 30 are doing it. Great job! I see 10 students right now that are working on Jamboard. They're doing what they're meant to be. They're writing their names, last name first. And you can give them instructions through the positive narration. I see that John and Jessica and Jaquan have all answered the question in a complete sentence, and they have written a strong sentence doing X, Y, and Z. So you're positively narrating, focusing on the students who are doing the right thing, and it's nice for those students. They hear their names, they know they're doing something well, and it also sends a powerful message to the rest of the class that I know who is doing what I'm asking them to do. In the virtual setting, because other students can read how many students have responded, maybe rather than saying exact numbers, which I do in class in person all the time, you could just say a percentage. And honestly, just don't make it up, but eyeball it, right? You don't actually have to count and know that it's 10 students. You can estimate. So that is incredibly powerful. One of the best things that I learned last year. Also, I would highly recommend John's classroom management course. I'll link to his blog, and you can learn more there. Use tools to allow you to see what students are typing in real time. Okay, there are two that I know of that are really. There are two that I know of. The first one is Pear Deck. If your school has a subscription to Pear Deck, it sounds like it's great. I've heard really good things about it. I don't know exactly how much it costs, but I think it might be around $150 a year if your school doesn't have a subscription. So the other option, and the one that I use that's free, is Desmos. And I've put tons of information out there online about Desmos in the Facebook groups. You can check it out. I've also linked to a Facebook group and a frequently asked questions. But I want to show you real quick what this looks like in my classroom and why it's so powerful. So right here, this is the Desmos dashboard. On the left-hand side, you can see students' names. These orange boxes are the ones that I have locked, the questions that I have locked students into, so they can only go to these questions. The blue box means that that's where a student is, and the little dot means that they have answered that question. If there's not a right or wrong question, it just means they've answered it. If they've answered it and there's a right answer or a wrong answer, a check means they got it right, and then an X means they got it wrong. So just watch.
Claro, Kaylee.
Watch as the students are going through these questions. I can see exactly where they are, and I can also click on here, and I can see what students are typing on a second-by-second basis. So I know exactly where every student is and exactly what every student is doing, what they understand, what they do not understand, and it gives me the opportunity to real-time keep up with them and provide them with formative feedback, immediate, real time. It's amazing. I'm going to click forward for a second and just see if I have. I was going to try and show you somewhere where you can see what they're typing, but I don't know.
You don't have any strategies yet.
Okay, so some students were typing here, and you would see them typing their answers and it populating letter by letter what they write. Okay. Again, I have lots of other information. Lots of teachers have other information. Brett Chanko has some great stuff out there about Desmos as well. Keep the structure the same. So keep the same class structure, or the daily instructional framework, as Tina Hargadon calls it. So what I do in my classes, every class they come in, there's a check-in that they have to do, and then it used to be that they would do a reading, and now what they normally do is do some vocabulary practice in Desmos. And then after that, we go into the guided oral input. kind of the main chunk of the class. We do a brain break, and then they always know at the end of class there are check-ins, they review the class, we write together, whatever structure it is that works for you. But it's been shown that structure and keeping the same structure for every class is really beneficial for students, and in particular students that are more at opportunity. Okay. Number 8, brain breaks for your kiddos and for you and for us. Every day I spend between 2 and 5 minutes on a brain break with my students. I have almost exclusively been doing breathing techniques and heartfulness/mindfulness techniques with my students, which, yes, I have years of practice with mindfulness, but the breathing techniques and the heartfulness techniques in particular, and tapping, are super easy to learn. And I've created some videos that if you want to watch them, I'll put the links in the other document as well. They're really easy to learn, and the beauty of these brain breaks, part of the beauty of the brain breaks, in my opinion, is that it gives me as a teacher a chance in the middle of class also to decompress, to down-regulate my nervous system, to take a minute or two and just relax, which is, I would say that 50% of my students do these on a regular basis because I always have them write feedback, and more than 50% say they do them, but I'm guessing that 50% do it. And then I would estimate that between 10 and 20% of my students now do the brain breaks that I have taught them this year outside of class, which to me is incredible. It warms my heart that I am hopefully giving these students tools that they can use when they leave my classroom and get into the real world of their own lives, which, as we know, right now are more stressful than ever. We well know that in our own lives, and know that our students are feeling those same things. So consider, if you can, check it out. Try brain breaks. You can Google breathing techniques. You can go to those videos I referenced. There are lots and lots of resources out there. Okay, second to last one is to, and this is not directly related to what you do in your class, but my recommendation is, if you're not already doing it, give yourself the gift of establishing or continuing to do a self-care practice. So that could be mindfulness. There are a couple of free mindfulness apps for educators that I put in the links. That could be prayer, heartfulness, daily devotions, walks outside. Based on the research that I've read recently, it's best to start with a really short period of time. Call it 2 to 5 minutes a day. Pick a practice, make it easy. If you decide you're going to do yoga, maybe you just get out your yoga mat and you raise your arms up, you do one stretch, and then you put it away. But the goal here is to establish the habit. And once you've established the habit and you know when you're doing it each day, after some period of time, you might decide to increase the amount of time. But the key here is just to establish a self-care habit, a practice. There's a lot of information out there. I linked to a podcast, a 10% Happier podcast, and there's also I'll add a link to a free ebook that has some fantastic ideas about establishing self-help practices. Okay. Number 10, focus more on increasing engagement and less on academic achievement. I know for some folks this won't be an option, and I think that if you focus more on increasing engagement, in particular by using tools that allow you to see how engaged students truly are, such as Pear Deck and Desmos, and I'm sure that there are lots of others out there. There are other tools that allow you to see real-time what students are doing in certain contexts, such as Google Jamboard, and there may be other tools out there. The reason I say this is that for our own mental health and for the mental health of our students, the first thing we need to do is just make sure they're there in front of the screen, at least absorbing and engaging in some of the material that we're presenting and working through with our students. If we do that, academic achievement will follow, but we are in crazy times right now, and I think that we all need to cut ourselves a break. I'll stop there, and I hope that this video and these tips and strategies are helpful and that they resonate with you all. Please feel free to let me know if you all have any questions or